Hello and welcome to Uchu no Hajimari, or if you are familiar with the anime, you may know this team better as Universe's Beginning. For some reason, the name did not get localized when the rest of the game did. I don't know if that was a conscious decision or if that was an accident. We will see later in the video. This is not the only instance that this team has of weird localization issues. But anyway, this is a series that is designed to give you a high level view of the teams in WIXOSS Diva format. If you're just jumping in, maybe you're been playing and you want to switch teams up, you want to know what Uchu's all about at a high level, this is the video for you. To start with, Uchu is the de facto control team in the Diva format. Their high level game plan is to basically try to deny as many resources as possible throughout the game, get to an end game state where their opponent is kind of drained of resources, and basically through incremental value and just general high efficiency cards get to a state where they can eventually overpower and overtake their enemy. They're quite different than most of the teams in Diva format tend to skew very aggressively. WIXOSS in general is a very aggressive game. So the Uchu game plan is very contrary to everything else in the game. It's a little bit different. It takes some getting used to. There's some strategies in play here that most teams, at least at the moment, don't really have access to. So we will start, as we always do, by looking at the team piece. Teams in Diva format, for the most part, are very heavily defined by their piece. Although, with that said, Uchu, of all of the Diva teams, is probably the least reliant on their piece overall. You could argue that Sanbaka is also up there, but the other teams are very heavily defined by their piece in terms of their mechanics and their gameplay. Uchu is not so much. Basically, what the piece does is, assuming you use this when your opponent is level 3, which is probably the best call, you get 3 instances of choosing to either draw a card or force your opponent to discard at random. What this functionally typically ends up with is you discard however many cards are in your opponent's hand, and then you draw the rest of them. So if your opponent has more than 3, you just discard the full 3. If they have like 2, you can discard 2 and still get 1 draw out of that. So it is a little flexible in that regard, so that's good. But this kind of exemplifies the Uchu game plan of denying resources by restricting the cards your opponent has in hand. You can restrict their choices and potentially leave them so that they're forced to have some open lanes potentially, which is something you can then kind of sneak by through. Uchu tends to have a lot of trouble punching through things, but if you deny the resources so that they actually don't fill all their lanes, that's one way they can actually get damage in. Moving on, we will go through the level 3 center Elrigs. Before I go through each one individually, I would also like to mention that all 3 of the level 3 Elrigs have a once per game ability that is identical. You can put all cards underneath all your other Elrigs on your field under this Elrig. On its own, it doesn't do anything, but all of the level 3s have abilities that are basically turned on depending on how many cards are underneath the center Elrig. So the theory here is you grow your assists to level 2. Then once they're level 2, you can activate the once per game ability. You can vacuum up all the Elrigs that are underneath your level 2 Elrigs, and that basically turns on the ability for your level 3, because that will be a full 7 cards. You'll have 3 natively under your level 3. You'll pull 2 each from the 2 sides, which will get you up to 7. And that basically turns on all of the really good things for all of the center Elrigs. So it's one of the reasons why Uchu wants to go long, is because they want to have all of their assists fully grown, and then their center Elrig kind of kicks into full gear. So we will discuss the level 3 centers as we always do in release order. We will start with Dr. Tamago. Her enter ability is to draw a card and force your opponent to discard a card of their choosing. On its own, not terribly impactful, but it does sort of align with the Uchu mindset of incremental advantage over time. If you have a lot of discard effects throughout the game, those just tend to add up and basically leave your opponent drained. So that aligns with that. She has an auto ability whenever she attacks. If there are 5 or more cards underneath it, you get to draw a card, which again, that ties into the once per game ability. If you do get the full 7 underneath it, your opponent also discards a card. So again, similar to the enter effect, basically whenever she attacks, you can draw an extra card and force your opponent to discard another card. So the idea is you grow her, you basically deny your opponent the ability to have any sort of meaningful hand. Meanwhile, you build up your own hand to, fill with guards if you need it, or whatever signy you need to fill the lanes, or removal options, or that sort of thing. Moving on, we have Bang, Read to Fight. very clearly should have been ready to fight. I think the actual Japanese translation is ready for battle, something like that. But another issue of weird localization. But anyway, her enter ability is your opponent chooses a Signy on their field and puts it into its owner's enter zone. It's kind of a weird vanish situation. It doesn't technically vanish, so it doesn't affect if you know your opponent's Signy is immune to vanishing, has an effect like that. It bypasses that, but in exchange, your opponent does get to choose. So you usually get the worst of their three Signy, which isn't the best. Um, but it is a lane clear at the end of the day, so it's not terrible. Her auto ability is at the beginning of your attack phase. If you have 5 or more cards underneath this L rig, you get to enter charge 1. So she's gaining enter basically as the game goes longer. If you have 7 or more cards underneath it, target green level 3 Signy gains Lancer until end of turn. So she actually, unlike the other two centers in Uchu, has a lot of punching power, where if you build her in such a way that you have a lot of green level 3 Signy, you can basically get a lot of extra life cloth crushes and use that to put pressure on your opponent and have a meaningful, actually, end game pressure that's not reliant just on resource denial. She actually is doing direct damage in a way, which is a little different than the other two. Bang does have a notable ability that she is probably the most splashable level 3, just if you're not looking for a specific team. Her two abilities that are auto are not team reliant, so you can actually get the enter charge and the Lancer regardless of who your team is. So it's easy to put her in just a general kind of good stuff team and have her as the center and do it that way, just partially because her enter effect, again, is relatively weak comparatively, so you don't necessarily mind losing that. But she's just a general, very efficient card and very good, especially as the game goes longer. Finally, we have Nova Skyfeather, who, again, at the time of recording, is not quite out in English yet. It's getting pretty close, a couple weeks away. But her enter ability is to return target Signy on your opponent's field to their hand. So very good lane clear, resource denial, that kind of thing. She has an auto ability whenever she attacks. If there are 5 or more cards underneath this L rig, you can target up to 1 Signy with a guard from your trash and put it on top of your deck. If you have 7 or more cards underneath her instead, you actually get to additionally draw a card. So what this functionally allows is if you have the full 7 underneath Nova, whenever she attacks, you pull a guard from your trash, put it on your deck, and then draw a card, which again puts that card into your hand. So basically, if Nova is level 3 and has the full 7 cards underneath her, you always have a guard in your hand, so you never have to worry about being on a timer with the opponent's L rig attacking and just not having guards. So it's a very defensive option. It will make for potentially very grindy games, as you know Uchu tends to in general, but very resilient against teams that just don't have the ability to get through your endless amount of guards. So it'll be a popular L rig for sure once the set comes out. So moving on from the centers, we'll have the assists. I'm going to talk about Nova. Another reason why I think she's going to be so popular moving forward is because her assists tend to be on the weaker side, just in general, in terms of their cost and efficiency. The popular level 1 assist is Nova Mute, who has an enter ability to pay 1, discard a card, target Signy on your opponent's field, cannot attack until end of turn. Notable is that Nova Mute at the moment is the only level 1 assist L rig that has attack phase timing, so she actually does have that unique benefit to her, so that's kind of a nice little niche there. Nova Mute's not necessarily a bad card for a level 1 assist, so that one's not bad. Nova Slash is a little bit overcosted for what it does. Pay 3 to put target Signy on your opponent's field into its owner's trash. So again, resource denial, not only does it clear a lane, save a life cloth, it also actually denies them an enter, which is why it costs 3 as opposed to like 2, which is what this type of lane clearing ability tends to cost 2. You can also pay a white to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal Signy, and add it to your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom. So it is potentially incidental card draw and filtering and selection, that kind of thing. Paying 3 to clear 1 lane on attack phase timing is not the best rate, and I think that's probably why the Nova assists tend to be overlooked. It's not bad by any means, but usually you can have that effect much better. I mean, you can even use the Lies level 2 assist that bounces for 2 and then potentially recurs a guard in the same color for a cheaper cost, that kind of thing. So there's just a lot of competition in terms of why the Nova assists aren't great. And again, because the Nova Center is going to be so good, I think we'll probably see a lot of Uchu teams shifting toward being Nova Center once it comes out. Moving on to Bang, we have Bang Crescendo as her common, most popular level 1. It's just a simple enter charge 2, which is a pretty common effect for a green level 1 L-Rig assist. Sometimes there's extra steps like Diagram Sanga's pulls it from the trash. Card Jockey's Wolf pulls it from the top of the library. This is just a straightforward play it, enter charge 2, good to go. Bang de Capo is the most common level 2. It's pay 1, which is really good for some damage saving. Basically, the next time you would take damage, instead you do not take damage, so it's sort of doesn't care where the damage came from. If it came from, the no limit once per game, if it came from a Signy attack, if it came from even like a DJ Levitt crossfade, all that stuff gets blocked, doesn't matter where it came from. So that's actually a little unique. Usually it specifies Signy attacks or L-Rig attacks or that kind of thing. You can also pay 2 more to basically do that again. So for 3 enter, you're saving 2 life cloth, which is really good. Of course, the downside is that this doesn't actually clear any lanes and give you any punching power. This is a purely defensive assist, but it's very efficiently costed and very good at what it does. So it's a very good assist. Moving on, finally, we have Dr. Tamago assists. Her most common level 1 is just a simple draw 2, which is very common for a blue level 1 type effect. As sometimes there's added extras like in Diagram. You can draw 3, discard 1, so it's a net of 2, but Tamago is just a straight draw 2. Her level 2 Tamago Jet Stick is 0 to grow, which is very interesting for a level 2. It has an enter ability to down target Signy on your opponent's field, so that'll save you from damage. And then pay 1 to draw 2, which is very efficiently costed. It'll keep your resources high moving into the late game. The reason why these two are notable is basically these align with the Uchu desire to grow your level 2s as quickly as possible and try to get as much out of them as you can. And with these 2 cards, Tamago is 1 single enter to get every effect on all of her assists if you run both of these, which is very efficiently costed. It'll save you 1 damage for sure, if you down a Signy that's in an open lane. You can potentially gain some card advantage out of it as well. So these 2 combo of assists is very efficient and very good at what they do. Moving on to the main deck, speaking of things like efficiency and incremental advantage, we'll talk about their level 3 specific Signy, which is Fenrir. You can see it has an Uchu specific ability that at the beginning of your attack phase, your opponent discards a card. So again, that's just more general incremental advantage that at the moment doesn't seem like a lot, but if you keep doing this again and again, it just adds up so much over time. She also has an enter ability to freeze up to 2 target Signy on your opponent's field. That's more incidental than anything. You can use Fenrir to do a full freeze strategy, and she's very good at that because there's a lot of support for it now, and there's more coming in the future. So freeze is becoming better as time goes on. So you actually will see occasionally Fenrir splashed outside of Uchu for the freeze effect. But within Uchu specifically, she's just great to have to, again, deny your opponent as many resources as they can over time and just eventually overpower them with the value you've been getting and that you've been denying them. So similarly to that is Random Drain, which is their kind of signature spell. You can draw a card and your opponent discards a card. If you have Uchu, which is the theme here, instead your opponent discards it at random as opposed to choosing it, which that can be backbreaking if you discard their servant card that they need to guard, or if they have a really powerful Signy that they need to, like a PRJ and a card jockey type situation that really defines their game plan. You can deny that as a resource as well. It's at the end of the day, it's basically pay 1 to draw 1, and then also get 1 card out of your opponent's hand. So again, it just sort of goes to that incremental advantage that you're paying 1, you're kind of getting +2 in card advantage, that you're drawing a card, your opponent's discarding a card, although this costs a card to use, so there is that. But the ability to deny your opponent resources is kind of the theme here, and Random Drain, even outside of Uchu, just in any deck that wants to discard cards, Random Drain is actually a very good card, even if they get to choose. But the fact that it can be random for Uchu just adds to that power level. Finally, one Signy that I would like to mention that's not necessarily Uchu specific, but does work extremely well with Uchu's game plan, and that's Robin Hood. Basically, there's a lot of text here. It's a little confusing, but the short version is if Robin Hood is the only Signy on your field, you can pay 2 and wipe your opponent's board and basically clear out all of their Signy. They do get put in the enter zone, so your opponent will get resources from those. But basically, it only happens if she attacks alone. Of course, she does have the ability as well that at the beginning of your attack phase, you can turn up to 2 of your Signy face down so that they don't exist, and then at the end of turn, they come back up. So you still have a full wall of 3 Signy, but you're only just attacking with one. Um, Obviously, the downside to this is that Robin Hood is the only Signy that will attack in, so it's only 1 damage at a time as opposed to potentially 2 or 3 that you could be doing. But the fact that it is kind of guaranteed damage, and it only is 2 enter to wipe the opponent's field of Signy, it also goes into the resource denial as well. It's kind of like discarding with extra steps. If your opponent fills their board and then you wipe their board, you just kind of 1 for 3 them with one card. You wipe their entire board, and if they're having trouble filling their hand with all of your discard effects, you can potentially lead to open lanes in the future, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, it is one guaranteed damage, kind of, if your opponent doesn't bounce it, that kind of thing. So it's a good way to punch holes, generate incremental advantage, and it really goes with the theme of everything that Uchu is trying to do. And with that, that is Uchu in a nutshell. So hopefully that gives you some idea. They're quite a bit different team compared to the rest of the teams in Diva format. Most of them, again, like to skew aggressively. Uchu is by far the most control-y, value-oriented team. A lot of incremental advantage. They play the long game. The goal is to kind of weather the storm as much as possible, and then by the time the late game rolls around, turn the corner and eventually just drown your opponent in value. So it's harder for them at the moment just because everyone is so aggro focused that usually by the time Uchu actually gets online, the game is mostly over at that point. So in the future, hopefully that will change as new cards come out and new options and better, more resilient Signy come out and that kind of thing. But at least for now, they're kind of a little bit on the lower end of the totem pole. Not to say they're bad, but just compared to some of the more efficient, aggressive options, they're a lot harder to play well, I think, at a high level. It requires a lot of practice in terms of knowing, what to do when, that kind of thing. And the games also tend to go longer. So if you have, 3 hours to play games, you're playing fewer games by playing Uchu just because the games tend to go longer. So it does kind of require a longer time investment from that perspective as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave comments, concerns, questions below, that kind of thing, and we'll see you in the next one.